What's going on, everyone? I'm sure the bulls are happy today as the SPY closed up a 0.77%. A lot of this rally was actually fueled by Apple, which is making a comeback after falling on earnings just last week. They actually came all the way back up to 215 today. We'll be going over why they are coming back. We'll also be looking at things like corporate buybacks here on today's video. We're seeing record amounts of corporate buybacks at the moment. We're also going to be looking at possible stagflation as well as some August seasonality and even some like Trump and India updates. So stick with us. We have a lot to go over today, and let's get into it. What a massive move and rally out of the S&P 500. That was quite the move and comeback today, actually testing yesterday's high and breaking it ever so slightly in the middle of the day, right around that $633 mark. This is going to be a big resistance to watch for over the next few trading days. We'll definitely be going over SPY here in a little while, so stick with us if you want more SPY action. But firstly, what fueled this SPY rally today? Apple was a big player in the S&P 500. Now, there were a lot of stocks moving up. Amazon was another big player out of the Mag 7, closing up 4%. But Apple made a full-blown earnings recovery. They dropped on earnings last week. The numbers actually were pretty good on their earnings report, but they did sell down to around that $200 support. Today, they are right back up, testing key resistance at 215 to 216. This is a very nice 5% move. Tim Cook is actually scheduled to join Trump at the White House right now, actually, while I'm recording this. Of course, the timing works out that way, but Apple's actually set to raise their U.S. investments to $600 billion, higher than their previously announced $500 billion investment plan. They're actually going to be doing a manufacturing effort as well called the American Manufacturing Program. I feel like that this is a very good thing for Apple to be doing right now. Of course, Tim Cook and Trump have had a little bit of beef in the past, but nonetheless, overall, I will say pretty friendly with each other, and with Apple making announcements like this, I'm sure that Trump will love that. So hopefully we do see Apple continue to make good headlines and news here. Like I said, this is an ongoing event, and we'll probably be seeing more news and headlines hit with it tonight and maybe even into tomorrow. Looking at Apple's stock, it is kind of pulling back here at the end of the day in after hours, but it did touch a crucial resistance. If we go to the daily chart of Apple, we can see how many times it has rejected around this 215 level. We can see once back in April, right? Another time back in May, recently at the beginning of July, and even just a few weeks ago at the end of July. So there's been a lot of touches around this range. Now Apple's right back to test it again. Can Apple start to truly recover? Apple's one of the stocks that has kind of been lagging behind in the Mag 7. You know, if we go and we switch to other charts, like let's just say Amazon, right? They actually came up to test their all-time high, or at least got pretty close to it recently. Apple, on the other hand, has stayed low, stayed stagnant. If we look at everybody's favorite Mag 7 stock, or I would at least say a lot of people's favorite, Nvidia has actually been breaking out to new highs. Tesla has been like the only exception that has been kind of flat and down with Apple, and I don't know that Apple wants to be in the same boat as Tesla right now, but it kind of is. But looking at their stock, you know, there could be a possible breakout coming over the next few trading days. If we do see this range start to break, watch for $220 plus on Apple. Shout out to Bookmap for the X-ray vision once again. There was 240,000 shares stacked up at 215 in the middle of the day today. Ended up being a perfect high of day for Apple. I'm sure a lot of people were looking at this, and this could have been a great target to sell at. So use the link in the description down below if you're interested in Bookmap. It can help you find amazing levels like what we're seeing here. But if we do break this range, just keep this in mind. 216 and 215 have had a lot of sellers stacked up. There's around 85,000 shares around the end of day today at 216, which is a lot more than 217 overhead, showing that it's a little bit more significant. Let me know in the comments section how you feel about Apple. Do you think that it's going to end up ripping to the upside here? I know initially it is kind of pulling back here in after hours, but as we know, sometimes these breakouts and moves can take a few trading days. Now, I know that the overall market has been blasting off a lot recently, and a lot of this could be attributed to corporate buybacks. Corporate buybacks are actually at record levels in July. I thought that this was some insane statistics to look at here, and this has fueled an overall bull rally, right? Now, I know that this might not be the sole thing fueling the rally, but with corporate buybacks, it definitely shows that companies are betting on themselves in a pretty awesome way. Now, these numbers were actually surpassing the previous record of $88 billion in 2006. We can just see how significant this jump was, and it's actually more than double the amount seen last year as well. I mean, that's a huge jump this year so far in 2025. Companies are definitely betting on themselves. I feel like that this is a very bullish sign. What's interesting, though, is I know that we've been looking at a lot of charts of executives and insiders selling recently, so kind of funny, right? The companies are buying up their own stock, but the insiders are selling. Interesting nonetheless, but the companies do seem to be betting on themselves, which is good to see, obviously. Whenever I'm looking at, let's say, the SPY and the overall run, you know, today's move was pretty awesome, up 0.77%. It didn't really break above the high from yesterday, though. I do think that that high from yesterday might prove to be a tough resistance to get through, but I wanted to just look at this overall bull run and just look at the recovery from these April lows, because we've actually been in a multi-year bull trend already that started in October of 2022, and currently this run has looked very similar. Even looking at like the current dip and recovery, you know, it kind of played out exactly like that 2009 to 2020 run there. Right where we're at, you can see it's been following fairly spot on. I do think that there could be a point where we start to see the SPY break back out again. You know, we've been dipping a little bit, and if we do start to see, you know, the SPY start to run up, just don't be surprised and don't get left in the dust, right? I know people love to look at these scary statistics out there in the stock market, and of course, it's always fun to look at bearish opportunities. They can honestly be some of the more fun opportunities out there, but I think it's important to also realize that, look, we're in an overall bull market right now, and if this continues like it has been, there could be some uptrend coming into play here, especially looking at these charts. I like how going into the end of year 3, there's usually a pretty good uptrend. So just keep that in mind for the rest of this year. It is possible that this overall bull trend does stay alive and continue pumping here. Now, something that's not necessarily quite as bullish is stagflation in the services sector. This is something that started to come out after we saw the ISM Services PMI come out yesterday. Now, this actually showed that the ISM Services PMI declined 0.7 points last month to 50.1, which is actually the second lowest reading since June of 2024. New orders fell minus 1 point to 50.3, the second lowest reading since June of 24. And then also the employment index decreased 0.8 points to 46.4, marking the fourth monthly contraction in 5 months and one of the lowest readings since 2020. But meanwhile, prices paid jumped 2.4 points up to 69.9, the highest since November 2022. I think that this is something to just keep in the memory bank right now. I know that the overall market started to pump back up today. I do think, though, that looking at possible, you know, contraction in the services market, number one, but then also stagflation in the services market, considering that it's such a big sector and part of the economy, is just something to keep in mind. Now, I don't think that this is something that we need to like run and just start selling right away or anything like that, but watching statistics and numbers into the end of 2025, I am going to be very mindful of this, and it is something that, you know, we might start to see play out and take a bigger hold on the economy, especially if the jobs numbers continue to worsen as they have been. Then things could start to get a little bit rough, at least with the overall economy as well here. But something that we couldn't go on without talking about today is Trump's India tariffs. He actually upped the tariffs on India to 50%. He had previously announced 25% tariffs just a few days ago, and now he's upping those to 50%. There was actually an executive order that was put out today, and this was pretty much attacking India for helping fuel the Russian war machine, as they like to call it. Nonetheless, they buy a lot of Russian oil, and they're trying to obviously get them to not do that. Hopefully this will help pressure Russia into obviously maybe ending the Ukraine war, but nonetheless, it will just put a lot of pressure on them anyways. I know that that's been a big thing on Trump's agenda, but I couldn't go forward without talking about this because it's been a big part of the market and the economy recently, and it's just been interesting to see this whole India kind of trade war collapse play out. Right? It's kind of funny, just looking at the overall timeline here. You guys can go ahead and screenshot this and check it out, but kind of funny, things just went downhill. They almost had a deal done, and then everything kind of collapsed, especially once Trump started talking about the Russian oil that was hitting there. But one last thing to hit on here is that there are a lot of earnings still coming out this week. D-Wave Quantum, Celsius, Eli Lilly, all reporting before open tomorrow. The Trade Desk, Rocket Lab, SoundHound, SMR or NewScale, Kratos, XYZ or Block, Take-Two Interactive, the makers of Grand Theft Auto, all reporting tomorrow. That is honestly a huge rundown. Now, it's not like the largest rundown ever. We could see other stocks have more popularity, like AMD earlier this week, or maybe even like DraftKings tonight. But I do think that something like NewScale, SMR, has had a lot of hype in the short term. If we go check out SMR's chart, it is pretty insane. Now, I know that they've been pulling back over the past few weeks, but if they could have a good earnings report, that could be exactly what they need to continue fueling this overall bull trend that they've been on. But if you're interested, go ahead and screenshot this. Of course, there's a few left for Friday as well. Fubo, Tempest, TerraWolf, Wendy's, CGC in the MJ sector. The economic lineup is pretty much empty, though, for the rest of the week. And we cannot forget the SPY levels and analysis for tomorrow. Looking at the SPY today, of course, it was up. It was in the green. I know that we mentioned that high from yesterday. It was sitting right around 632, 633. If we could see a good 633 breakout tomorrow morning and even maybe move above like 633.70, which is a next major resistance I have, then it's not terrible to keep watching SPY back to the upside. Over the past few trading days, I've been watching the SPY play out in a very interesting way. We've been trying to hold this lower trend line. We've talked about this trend line a lot on the channel over the past few weeks. If we zoom out on like an hourly chart, we can just see how many good holds and how crucial this trend line has been on the overall uptrend here. But whenever I zoom in, let's say, go back to like a 5-minute chart, we can see that things have gotten choppy the past couple trading days. I think that really getting out of this zone between like 627 and 633 is going to be very important. And I do love 633 overhead. There's been a lot of bounces at that level on the SPY. And if we do see a breakout there, do not be afraid to continue with the overall bull and uptrend. Now, if we do start to see, let's say, a pullback, and I would say a pullback under the low from yesterday at that 627 mark, there could be a great downside opportunity as well. And if we do see that 627 level break, I'm definitely going to be watching 625 extremely closely. That'll be the next big level there. There could be like a 2-point play, possibly down to 625, below that 627 mark. But I think the big thing is just seeing, okay, how's the SPY going to move over the next few days? Are we going to see like an overall break and move higher out of this range, or are we going to end up seeing kind of a collapse and then that overall uptrend start to give out? That is what I am very curious of. Hopefully we get better trade war updates than what we've been seeing with India this week, right? Maybe that'll help fuel the SPY a little bit better. But now it's time for some plays and setups for tomorrow. With my first one, I'm looking at a stock that is generally considered a bit boring, which is Walmart. But today it was not boring at all. It was up 4%. This thing was on fire. Look at the daily chart and how Walmart actually filled the gap, and it's sitting back up around resistance. I am going to watch for an all-time high test around 105.32 over the next couple trading days. And if we could get another nice green day tomorrow, that could definitely be something to watch out for. Now, Walmart, like I said, is generally considered fairly what I would call boring, right? It's a slow mover. The options that expire this week on August 8th ended up popping up like 2,000%. If you went with the 103 strikes, if you went more in the money at like the 100 strikes, it's sitting at like 500%. Now, if you go out to next week, some of these strikes like 104, 103 are sitting up around 650, 600% or so. So there can definitely be some good action with Walmart, especially with the options games here. So watch it to the upside. There was a lot of good momentum today, and the main thing is just continuing off of this momentum tomorrow. Like if we open up and it's having price action kind of like this, I would say it's a no trade. It's probably going to be pretty boring and not really moving too much. But if we open up and we start to see good candles coming back in like this, there could be like a good multi-hour run to the upside here. So watch Walmart. I like it quite a bit here in the short term. With my next setup, I'm looking at Pony. Pony AI. Yes, this is a pretty crazy stock. Pony was up 4% today. Looking at them on the daily, they've been trying to bounce off key support, and they're actually moving up towards the upper end of their range. They've recently came up and tested like $15.75 to $16 a couple different times. I am going to be watching for that again in the short term. If they can end up breaking above a key intraday resistance that I noticed right around $14.65, then that's where I'll be watching for that overall uptrend to start to materialize. If we don't open up tomorrow above $14.65, or if there's no run continuing, then I don't think that it's really worth, trying to play it or chasing it. We want to see good momentum and good opening candles, kind of like what we saw today again. But now it is time for tomorrow's momentum plays. And with the first one, I'm looking at ticker symbol BMNR to the upside. If it can break out above 39.25, just around that high of day today, then watch it up. There is slight resistance at $40 to watch for, but we're mainly looking for that high of day break and for BMNR to continue. It was up 15% today. It is starting to come back in a pretty nice fashion. With the next stock, watch Amazon also to the upside. If Amazon can break out above 222.70, then watch it up. This is a pretty good move that Amazon had today, up 4%. I know that we compared it earlier to Apple, but like I said, if we could break above 222.70, essentially at that high of day, watch for a continuation. It's good to see them coming back after their earnings disaster last week, and that was a pretty rough move that Apple and Amazon had at the end of last week there. And with the third and final stock, watch Lucid to the downside. If Lucid breaks under $2.15, there could be an earnings continuation play down. $2.15 is just under the low of day today, and it bounced there a couple times ever since the earnings did release. But those are the three plays. Do not play them unless they break below or above the levels that I listed. In BMNR and Amazon's case, they are to the upside, but with Lucid's case, it is to the downside. With those out of the way, it's time to get into our $1 million big money trade. And we're looking at ticker symbol AES. Yes, we actually looked at AES a couple of weeks ago. There was a previous big money trade on AES on July 11th of 2025. But as we can see here, the new big money trade is a little bit shorter time frame. It's also the 13 strike call instead of the 15 strike call, so it's a lot closer to the money. They put $1.08 million into this trade. It does expire on September 12th of 2025. AES pretty much provides clean energy, renewable energy, things like that for some of these bigger tech companies and data centers out there. Whenever I'm looking at AES, I'm a little bit worried that we're seeing what I would call a rejection at resistance, but something that's nice is that there's actually a good range here on AES. Note how AES has bounced a lot, right around $12.40. If we use that as a solid support in the short term, the risk-reward ratio is not too bad here. Now, I will say it's a pretty short-term play. It's a little bit riskier than the other AES 15 strike play as well, given that it's a lot shorter time frame. I will say, though, the 13 strike is definitely closer to the money. I mean, AES was even trading in the money on these $13 strikes earlier on this morning. So if we do see a good pop with AES, the big money trader here would benefit quite a bit, being in with $1 million. Nonetheless, very interesting setup. AES has been trying to uptrend ever since I would say the beginning of July, and they've been doing quite well. Honestly, from that low in June, at the very end of June there, to the recent high, it's up around 39, almost 40%. That is quite the rip. Now, if it does end up coming up off of this dip, the 13 strike will go in the money fast and should end up playing out pretty well here. But overall, pretty fire big money trade. But how could we go forward without looking at today's member of the day, which is Dash NTP. Dash, that was some nice gains that you posted up there. They have some leaps on Palantir and are up around $48,000 on these leaps. Congrats to you. Like to see plays and positions like that. You have a lot of different positions here with Palantir, so glad to see them working out. Awesome job, and those are some great profits right there. Let's go. If you're interested in Member of the Day, post up in the Profits channel. There was a lot of great profits posted up. I like Stay Ready there with the nice 20K. Steve with some nice dubs as well. I mean, the Profits channel has been popping lately with all the great moves and action going on out there. If you want to get in on the action, join up to the trading floor. Use the link in the description and the comment section down below. Use code BIGMONEY at checkout to save $100 on the yearly setup. This will allow you to get all of the tools within our Discord server. We can see today's trades by the Surge bot did very well. Walmart up 640%. Caught a good one there. Apple, IREN, up over 250% and at 350% respectively. So join up. The link is in the description, and the code Big Money is awesome. Saves a lot of money on that yearly package. Other than that, I hope that everybody has a fantastic rest of the trading week. There's a lot going on. Watch out for more Trump and Apple updates. Let's go.